Turn with me to the Gospel of Mark. In verse 19. I have a head cold. Do not be alarmed. Even though there's the virus out there, there's still other things. You know that, don't you? Flu, colds, allergies, stuff. Verse 19. Jesus drops a bombshell. He just up and says, one of you guys is going to betray me. Can you imagine how startling that was? And one of the people there knew that it was him, which is going to get even more interesting real quickly. But they say, is it I? Now, if you have a New American Standard Version, that's not what they say. They say, surely not I used to teach Greek, but I try not to let it ruin me at times like this, because honestly, if you don't ever know Greek at all, you're good, you can go to heaven and all that kind of stuff. But there's an interesting thing about the way questions function in the Greek language. And there are actually three ways that you can ask a question in Greek. It's pretty cool. Depending on the words you use when you're asking your question, there are uk words and there are may words, and depending upon how you do that or don't do that, you're either just asking a question like we ask a question all the time, or you're asking a question and you're expecting the answer to be yes. Or you're asking a question and you expect the answer to be no. And this is a question that is expecting when they say, is it I? No. So that's kind of going on here, and that's part of what is going on. Now, to show you another example that I think is interesting as well, in John chapter 6, when Jesus has been getting down to business with hard sayings, and eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, and this is causing people to believe, and he looks at the 12, and he says, do you want to go too? That's one of those questions where he expects the answer to be, no, we don't want to go. And in fact, they don't. But, so this can happen now. And then we've done that, let's go over to a parallel in Matthew 26, starting in verse 20. Matthew 26, starting with verse 20. And we get the interesting part I mentioned to you just a moment ago about this. To 25. Look at verse 25 in particular. And Judas, who was betraying him, answered and said, surely it's not I, Rabbi. Jesus said a colloquialism, which in the day would have been, yeah, it is. You have said it yourself. How could someone like Judas, who knows full well what he's up to, say, well, it's not me, surely? And yet, if we think a little bit, we understand people do stuff like that all the time, don't they? We think about, perhaps first, we think of our children, and we catch them red-handed. Their hand in the cookie jar, if you will. Cookie crumbs about their lips. No, I didn't get any cookies. You know? And they got a straight face and looking in the eye. Cookies and crumbs dropping off their face. sometimes folks don't grow up from that. And people get caught right in, I didn't do that. We've all had things like that happen where we know somebody did something. No, it wasn't me. They have what we call the proverbial smoking gun, and then they didn't shoot the gun. So this is part of the way that people do. It's just the way people do. They don't want to own up to things. They don't want to admit it, even though they look silly because everybody and their brother knows that they did it, but they don't want to admit that they did it. And so this is not an uncommon thing. One of the words that psychologists use about this is compartmentalizing. Some of the people who do some of the worst things that you can imagine. And you would wonder, how can anybody live with themselves if they do stuff like this? And what they do is they put it over here in a little compartment. They wall off it from everything else in life. So they don't have to deal with it in the rest of life, at least psychologically. And so they will, no, it's not me. I didn't do that. And oddly enough, psychologically, in many respects, what they're saying is true because the person that they normally are and usually are most of the time didn't do that. The person that has the abnormality or the problem going on is the one that did it, and that they're still guilty. Now, let's look a little further down here in Matthew and see what we can find out here. Well, for instance, how does Simon Peter react after this betrayal thing? He's not happy to just say, no, surely it's not me. Is he? He's going to reinforce that, is he not? In fact, he will say, if all these other people do, I won't. That's a pretty big boast, isn't it? These other guys, I'm sure that made them feel really good. These other guys might, but I'm not going to do it. I won't betray you. Knowing the rest of the story, we know how silly that sounds. It would have sounded that silly to Jesus, who knew the rest of the story. And Jesus said, yes, you will. Rooster's not going to crow, depending on which account you use. The rooster's not going to crow before you've done that. When he crows, you're going to know. Isn't that what happened? Luke has a very interesting way of doing this. As Jesus is being taken from one venue to another, Simon's out there in the courtyard. He's gotten in the courtyard through John, who apparently has connections with the high priest. And Simon Peter sees Jesus being led along, and Jesus looks him in the eye. That's all he had to do. Can you imagine how he felt? I won't do it. I will not do it. And here he's looking at a man he's just denied 3 times. Wow. But let's look at this a little bit too, because we want to examine the who me attitude that I'm thinking we've all done that. And Simon Peter says essentially, he said, I'll die before I betray you. And you know what? I think he meant every word he said. I don't think that was some vain boast. Because Simon Peter, he was that kind of a guy, right? I mean, he's not the kind of man you want to mess with. And what happens when they come to get Jesus? Fisherman has a sword, not a swordsman. And he goes for Malchus. How good a swordsman is he? Does he cleave his skull? No, he nips his ear off. So Simon's not the man you want defending you in a sword fight. But what does Jesus tell him? Put it back in the sheath. Put it back where it came from. Now, I think he would have gone down with the sword in hand, fairly quickly because he's not too good with it, and hit the ground bleeding out. And he, you know, I told you, I'd die. But when Jesus says, I want you to put your sword in your sheath, man, does he lose his courage? Running off. It's like Jesus said he would. Because you see, Jesus didn't want or need that kind of courage. That was Simon Peter being Simon Peter. And Jesus calls people for self-denial, does he not? Because he needs something out of us that we're not naturally inclined to do. And Peter's naturally inclined to just go down in the world because he's that kind of a guy. And Jesus said no. And can you imagine, there he was all ready to just go for it. And Jesus takes the sword away from him, and there he is. Off he goes. Off he goes. And we'll deny, as Jesus predicted, he will deny Jesus 3 times. And it gets worse because he's kind of, you know, mousing along, kind of following him, kind of feeling bad. This little servant girl comes up to him. Little servant girl. Not a bunch of armed soldiers. He's ready to fight with the sword. Little servant girl says, you're one of them, aren't you? No! How bold is that? Not very. We all have our comfort zones, our areas where we're apt to bow up and defend and all of that, fight rather than flight. But Jesus, when he calls us, look at Luke 9:23. Because this is like entry-level stuff. The rest of it does not, cannot, will not work without this. And Jesus makes it plain that that's the way that it is. If anyone would come after me, how many people is that? If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, and take up his cross daily and follow after me. He's essentially saying, if you want to be my disciple, and in the Great Commission in Matthew 28, the command of the Great Commission, I went the longest time thinking the command was go. It's not. The command of the Great Commission, you want to go Greek again on this. That's just more Greek than I do all you. Jesus said, make disciples, and he has 3 participles in there. As you are going, baptizing, teaching. And so he wants people to be disciples. You can't be a disciple and be your own person. You cannot do it. A disciple is somebody who's going to be like somebody else. A disciple is somebody who wants to be like the master, the teacher. The word rabbi in Hebrew basically means, it can mean 2 things. It can be master, it can be teacher. They're kind of fused together, parts of them into the same word. And so, when Jesus says in Luke 6:46, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do the things that I say? That's a rabbi talking to his followers and saying, you call me your master, but you don't do what I tell you. So that doesn't mean a thing in the world. You talk a big game, but you don't do it. Why you do that? Which the parallel, of course, is not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, which implies you're going to do what they say. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, is going to get it, because it's not saying Lord, Lord, it's obeying. Talk is cheap. Even if we mean it when we say it, sometimes when we get in a position like Simon Peter, it's cheap because we weren't willing to do. Simon Peter wasn't willing to do whatever it took. He wasn't willing to do that. He thought he was. I think he really, really, really thought he was. But he wasn't. I posted in Facebook, which if anybody's on Facebook, you know, the hard ever post on Facebook. I posted that Jesus is looking for real men. He's looking for real women too, but he's looking for real men. culture and other cultures considered to be a real man isn't what Jesus is looking for. Simon Peter thought he was a real man. I'll be there. I'll die. These other guys here, a bunch of wimps, but I'm here for you. But he wasn't. If he'd been a real man, when Jesus asked him to put the sword up, he'd have put it up, and he'd have stayed there with him. But he acted like a scared little kid. And so Jesus is looking for real men and real women who first deny themselves. Did Jesus ever cut none? Did he ever have situations he faced that were hard? The Garden of Gethsemane, 3 times. Let this cup pass from me if it's possible. But not my will, but yours be done. If I got to go to the cross, I'll go to the cross. It's not something I like. It's not something I'm looking forward to. It's not something I'm going to enjoy. But if you want me to go, I'll go. He was a real man. Simon Peter hadn't learned to be a real man yet. He will. And life is a process. That's another thing we need to realize. Life is a process. We honestly, sincerely declare that we're denying ourselves, but we don't know what that means. And we got to work it out as we go along. Because every once in a while something will come up and say, oh, my, that's a little Christianity that I was thinking about. What are we going to do then? But it's what Jesus wants. So I signed up for it. I'm going to do it. And that can get awfully interesting at times. If we have a Jesus filter, everything that comes our way, we filter through Jesus. What would he do? Remember what would Jesus do from way back? That was interesting, wasn't it? Everybody got crazy, and they were wearing the bracelets, and they had the necklaces, and they had the t-shirts, and they had all this kind of stuff. WWJD. I was teaching a high school class in Knoxville, Carnes, when all that was going on. And Carnes High School was a really big high school, and they had a bunch of people with all the paraphernalia, WWJD. So I asked the class, probably about 20, 25 people in the class. And I said, how many of the people that you know at Carnes High School, the most pathetic athletic program in the state of Tennessee, how many people do you know at Carnes High School who have a clue what Jesus would want them to do? You know the highest percentage I got? I won't guess. It's fun. 3%. That's somebody being charitable, trying to be nice. Maybe 3%. Because you see, it's easy to wear something that asks, what would Jesus do? But doing it, first of all, finding out what he would do is another thing. And then doing it is yet another thing. Oftentimes people get stopped on what would that mean? Because they don't know. They have an intuitive notion about it. They have some kind of, oh, well, I think he'd do this, and they don't know. More often than not, when you're like that, you're actually wrong. So, Simon Peter needed to know, what would Jesus do? Judas is easy. He wouldn't betray somebody. Okay. But Simon Peter needs to know it on more of a level maybe that we're accustomed to dealing with in our own lives. Where we get to that moment, we have moments, and we realize Jesus would want me to do whatever, and I really don't want to do it. Maybe it's embarrassing. Maybe I wouldn't feel like a real man if I did that. But Jesus wants me to do it. And so if I'm a real man or a real woman, I do it. Because that takes courage. It's easy to do what we are naturally inclined to do and have a personality to do. It is not easy to step out of our comfort zone and be somebody that we're not because we're supposed to be Jesus-like. Okay? I guess I can ask questions. You can ask questions. I get carried away with these things. If you've got a question, just let me know. Raise your hand. Whatever you do, you can ask questions. Or or just sit there. This reminds me so much of Illuminati. And not at all like East Tennessee School of Christian Commission, where I can't even get 5 words out. So, all right, let's go to John 21. We're not done with Simon Peter. We're not done with this. And Simon Peter does it without saying it this way. When Jesus is going to deny him, he says, "You're talking to me. You're talking about me. You're telling me they're going to deny you. It's not going to happen." It's like Judas. So, resurrection. And Jesus is, on one occasion, out. Some of them are out fishing, trying to do something they're a little familiar with and get comfortable. In many ways, they're scared to death. You see somebody on the shore. It's Jesus. Now, guess who's the one who jumps in the oars or furiously swimming to shore? Well, that'd be Simon Peter, wouldn't it? Because that's how he rolls, right? So he gets there and they have some fish. One of the things that he got to do was do the net scene, and it reminds him of back when he'd done that in his ministry. They catch all these fish and it's the Lord. So he gets there, they have their fish. And Jesus, Simon, come here, man. Let's have a chat. Which is something we need to learn how to do. When people mess up big time, it's easy. But it's not easy to work with them and help them to get back what they need to do. Because you see, there's a certain pride in, "Oh, we didn't do that, you did." And that doesn't help anything. That's not what Jesus would do. Because here's what he's doing right here. Now, John, as a writer, and using the Greek language, he uses fairly simple Greek. If you're going to go to one of the Gospels to try out your Greek knowledge and see what you can translate, John's your man. Luke's not your man, by the way, but John is. And one of the things John does, and it flies in the face of one of our iconic things we say in the churches of Christ, is he uses phileo and agapao interchangeably. Because, we phileo's this and agape's this. Well, sort of. Words have definitions, semantic ranges, and phileo's kind of like this, agape's kind of like this, and mostly they overlap. They got a piece on the end there that's unique to both of them, but they got a lot of interchangeability. So just you heard it here first, maybe. So he interchanges them, and he's going to use the agape and phileo here in this conversation that he has with Simon Peter, where he asks him 3 times, "Do you love me?" But the way he does it, I think he means to use that part of the words that are different. I really do, because I think, well, context determines meaning, and I think we got something going on here. And just the short of it that we'll look at and break down, he gets with Simon. He says, "Simon." Notice he didn't call him Peter. What's Peter mean? Rock. Was he a rock? No. So let's get real here, Simon. I told you I renamed you Rock, but you got a ways to go to be my rock. It says, "Simon Bar-Jonah, Simon son of Jonah, do you love me?" Agape. Which has as part of its semantic range, no matter what. And Simon says, "I phileo. I'm your friend. I really have a strong affection for you. You're like a brother to me." Simon, do you agape me? I'm your friend. I'm your phileo. I'm your brother. Simon, Lord, you know everything. You know everything. You know I love you like a brother. And he did. But he didn't love him enough to stay with him when he had his sword taken away. Yeah. We are where we are. You see, when Jesus told Simon back in the original discussion, when Simon says, I don't care what these other people do, I will stay with you. And Jesus said, no, you won't. You should have said, oh, okay, you know these things, let's talk. But now we got to revisit the conversation. Do you love me more than these? He starts it off. And I think he's based on what happened with that first conversation. Do you love me more than these people? You said you love me more than these people. You said they could all run out, but you wouldn't, you die. Do you really love me more than they do? You know what the answer to that is? No, I don't. I didn't. But he doesn't. He's evasive. You're my brother. I really care about you. When he asked the third time, well, okay, are you like a brother to me? Lord, you know that I am. You know that I am. And he was. And essentially, okay, Jesus has brought him to reality. He's brought him to where he really is. He loves Jesus like a brother. That's no small thing. But that's what it is. Now, he can get better. He did get better. But we are where we are. We talk about that sometimes when we're looking at the book of Acts and how people are converted and they ask questions and they get different answers because of where they are on the road to salvation. You know that? And so we're all on the road of how we are with Jesus, right? It's a process. It's a process. There are many people, frankly, who, if they were in the garden and Jesus gets, they come and he says, put the sword away, we're going to stand there and say, okay, we wrote it properly. Got work to do. So, after that, he says, son, let me tell you something. Now that we've got to reality, now that we're dealing with real stuff. Because Jesus can deal with real stuff. He can't deal with bravado and false, all this. He can deal with real. So he's basically been saying, let's get real, Simon. He says, Simon, when you were a young man, you just pretty much did whatever you wanted to. You wanted to go somewhere. You went somewhere. Because that's how you were. That's the kind of guy you were. You were rough and tough. You still what you wanted to do. So Simon, things are going to get different as you age. And one day, people are going to take you where you don't want to go. And you're going to go. Because you see, he got a cross. Real, honest goodness cross. Was probably what he was afraid of in the garden. You know, oh no, they'll crucify me, you gotta get out of here. It's a tradition, but it's a pretty strong tradition. That when they finally decided we got to get rid of this Simon Peter guy because he's spreading all this stuff about Jesus and it's causing problems, and we're just going to have to. He's not a Roman citizen, so we're not going to cut his head off. We're just going to crucify him. It is said, and again, this is not the gospel, but it's pretty well attested to. Crucify me upside down. I don't deserve to be crucified like Jesus. And so, tradition has it that he was crucified upside down. He didn't run off. I mean, we see this even in the early stages of the book of Acts when they said, you got to stop preaching this Jesus. He said, no, we got to do that. We got to preach it. And that set a course. And he stayed on the course. And the course led to his own cross. And unlike what he had done in the garden, he went with it and said, yeah, but don't do me unto you so typically for a crucifixion. I'm just not worthy of dying that way. Like Jesus, just do it upside down. He got it, didn't he? He got it. That's a real man right there. That's what a real man looks like. Didn't look like the guy with the sword in the garden. hacking away and not doing much damage, and then having his sword taken away. Whew, there he goes. That's manly stuff. Because you know who he was following? Jesus. Manliest man that ever lived. He grew up. And he decided he would face like Jesus. Well, what would Jesus do? He figured that out. And he did it. So, when we got this statement here, King James, he said, that the force of the Greek is more of, surely it's not me. Sometimes in life, the best thing we can do is say, you know, it is me. It really is. I didn't mean to do this. I didn't think I'd do this. I thought I'd do better, but I didn't. I messed up. Yeah, it's me. And that's okay as far as that goes, because Jesus had this moment with Simon Peter. He didn't just, He said, let's just deal with where you are, then we can move ahead. We can go forward. Let's just be real with this. You are what you are. You did what you did. We're moving forward. I got stuff for you to do. And the betrayer got to preach the first gospel sermon. Isn't that amazing? That's the way Jesus is. He said, dust yourself off, pick yourself up. We're not done with this. Let's take our next step. I got steps for you to take. And so that's how this applies to us. Because in the real world of our imperfections, and we're all imperfect, we all make mistakes, we all sin, don't we? We don't always do as well as we know to do. Sometimes we don't do as well as we intended to do. I mean, everybody's like that. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it human, and God understands. And so, when Jesus says to us, in one way or another, here and there along the way, you're going to betray me. We don't mean to, we don't want to. Part of us will want to know. Yeah, probably you're right, because, sometimes I don't live up to my expectations for myself. And Jesus didn't say that, okay, then get out of here. He said, okay, that's part of the deal. We're still together. Anybody here have children, or have had children, or know people that have children, or were a child yourself? Wow, so somebody wasn't any of those. Did your children ever do something they shouldn't do? Did you say, there's the door, slam, you're never coming back to this house again? No. Some of us have had to do that with our children because of a series. But that's not your first thing, is it? Guys, remember when Jesus asked, he said, if your child asks for fish, you don't give him a snake. Some bread, you don't give him a rock. If you being evil know how to do good, how much more is your Heavenly Father? And that's your Heavenly Father. So, as we spill the invitation time, are you a child of God? I'm in an Atlanta Crackers baseball game. That takes us back quite a ways, does it not? Ponce de Leon ballpark, which my Spanish teacher later told me was Ponce de Leon ballpark. But my dad's taking me and my best friend to Atlanta Crackers game, and there's a foul ball coming down. And my dad, he's a mechanic. He got his big gnarly hands and everything, and the ball, I can see the seams. It's coming down into his hands. Edwin. So we're going home. We dropped Lamar off at his house. I said, Dad, if you'd have caught the ball, would you have given it to me or Lamar? It hurt him. I'd have given it to you. You're my son. Are you a son or a daughter of God? All spiritual blessings are in Jesus. Privileges, forgiveness, there's every spiritual blessing that there is, an inheritance, everything. But if you're either in or you're out. You either have it totally or you don't have any of it. That's just it's that stark. Are you a child of the King? If you're not, why aren't you? Do you believe that Jesus is who he said he was? He's actually the Christ, the Son of the living God. If you're convicted that that's the truth, then why haven't you done anything about it? And I don't want you to do something just because I'm saying this and pushing you into it. I want you to ask yourself, what's holding me back? If we're Christians, have any of us ever messed up? And most of the time, that's covered by our faithfulness. If we walk in the light and see himself as in the light, we have fellowship one with another. And the blood of Jesus, his Son, cleanses us from all sin. Just staying faithful, putting one foot in front of another. The blood keeps cleansing us. We're not rebelling. We're not saying, forget that. We're just struggling. We're trying. And God says, I've got you covered. So, you may just need to kind of firm it up a little bit. I can do better. Maybe you stop walking in the light. It was said of David that he only departed one time in his life. That's kind of strange and striking of itself because he did bad things. But inspiration says he only departed from God one time. Guess when that was? I bet you can. Uriah the Hittite. So what does he do then? He doesn't have a hiccup, he doesn't have a bad moment, and almost as soon as he does what he shouldn't do, he feels badly about it and gets back on the road. He dug his heels in. Killed an innocent man to hide his sin. The man he killed was a better man than David was. And for 9 months, he was out of God's grace because he dug in his heels and said, no, I will do what I need to do to protect my reputation and be the king. And one day Nathan came. Tells him a story about this guy. He only had one sheep, and so the guy's got sheep all over the place. But he gets this guy's sheep and kills it. And David, he's a shepherd, he's clued into that. Oh man, well, he's going to repay fourfold. You're the man. It hit. Yeah, I did far worse than that. Psalm 51 says, against you and against you only did I sin. Maybe you left the path of forgiveness